Hi, Mike. Thank you very much for agreeing to be with me on this interview.
Yeah, no
And
problem.
I'm Mushtaq Al-Atabi. I'm the Provost and Chief Executive at Heriot-Watt University, Malaysia. And you are?
Mike Tumilty. So I am Deputy Chair of Court at Heriot-Watt University. I've been Deputy Chair of Court for the last 2 years, and I've been on court for 7 years. But I'm also a Heriot-Watt graduate,
Fantastic.
having graduated in economics in 1994, which feels like an awful long time ago now.
That's fantastic. So if you were to just very quickly and briefly tell us about things from the very beginning,
Yeah.
how the whole interest in economics started,
Wow. Yeah.
and where are you now besides the work that you do for Harriet Watt?
Yeah, so economics, I studied to A level in England. Was always interested in business, was always interested in finance. So when I thought about university courses, economics sprung to mind. And I would say in my 4 years at Heriot-Watt, one of the things that really interested me was the application of economic theory to businesses.
Right.
So when I graduated from Heriot-Watt in 1994, I joined Standard Life Assurance Company,
Right.
which was one of the large insurance companies in Edinburgh, as a general management trainee. So effectively was in financial services, and indeed have been in financial services now for 31 years as now Global Chief Operating Officer at another asset manager.
So who has been a big influence in your life?
Yeah, so if I think back, I mean, there's probably 3 or 4 sort of big sort of milestones in my life. The first would obviously, getting my A levels and so my parents, right? I mean, ultimately they were there with me, all through my journey as a child growing up in the
The ups
northeast
and
of
the
England.
downs and everything.
Absolutely,
Yes.
yeah. So a very proud moment for them was me graduating.
Yep.
So Heriot-Watt would definitely be one. Then Standard Life would be another, because ultimately, 28 years in one organization is a long time. I met my wife, I had my 2 kids. So that's probably, you've got early child upbringing, university, family. And then the other thing I did for quite a number of years was referee football. So
Fantastic.
those 4 things, sort of childhood, parents, wife, family, Heriot-Watt, Standard Life, and then this hobby have that kind of probably made me the person I am today, to be honest.
That's really fantastic.
Yeah.
But is there any decision that you felt tested your leadership, was particularly challenging, particularly satisfying? If you were able to share with us a moment like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of times in my professional career. Certainly, we did a large merger in 2017
Right.
between 2 organizations that had very different cultures.
Right.
And I think one of the things that I needed to do, particularly running operations, change in technology, was make sure that we continued to provide the enabling services for the organization. But I had to bring 2 very different teams together to create a single team. And I think the one thing that taught me about my leadership is never to assume, but to ask questions and to try and understand where people are coming from. Because I think everybody has a story, and when you merge and you think you know more than somebody else, if all you do is simply assume and never ask, then you can come up with wrong decisions, wrong conclusions, and you will never create a winning team. So for me, as a leader, it is to try and understand the context and the backdrop and the story, so that actually I can bring multiple stories together to create a better story.
So this is really fascinating, because often when we look at business, we think of the hard parts of
Yeah.
it, the managing risk, managing. But you are talking about managing the story.
Absolutely.
So could you actually say a little bit more about how did you really integrate these stories? And if you could just give an example, that would be very helpful.
No, absolutely. So I mean, I think, and it is interesting, right? Because when you merge, there is a lot of systems work that needs to be done.
That's right.
So you're moving from 3 operating infrastructures to a single operating infrastructure. But effectively, from a leadership and from an interpersonal perspective, I needed to create a leadership team. And obviously, we had 2 of everything. So we needed to all intents and purposes, create processes and follow, practices, which ultimately resulted in us selecting the best people for the job, but also being very cognizant that you wanted to try and blend the two together to come up with a better culture. So I think for me, it is almost making sure that you afforded everybody with the same opportunity. Because I'd grown up with a bunch of people in the organization I work for.
Yep.
I'd never met some of the people in the other organization.
That's right.
So I needed to make sure that I could almost operate from a blank canvas without any inherent bias. And I think sometimes when you look at why do mergers and acquisitions fail, it's because there is a lot of inherent bias in a lot of the decisions that ultimately are taken. So you've got to make sure you've got processes that don't allow for that.
So this is very interesting. And earlier you mentioned that's very simple, basic advice of not to assume, but ask questions. But in today's world, leadership in a highly uncertain, highly volatile space. Is there any other advice you want to give to aspiring leaders?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing is sometimes to be brave. Because, in an uncertain world, I think you're absolutely spot on, Mushtaq. In an uncertain world, what you often crave is more and more detail because ultimately you're often afraid to make big decisions.
Yep.
Not because you're afraid to make a decision, but you don't want to get things wrong. And so for me, one of the things that I talk about is the need to be decisive and analytical. And you want to analyze things and then you want to make decisions. In financial services, it's not like I'm a surgeon doing open heart surgery, which is life-threatening. So ultimately, the amount of information I need to make a decision is less than probably somebody who is a surgeon, for example. Yeah. So for me, the advice to leaders in business is sometimes just you've got enough information. You need to trust your instinct, your experience, your knowledge, and make the decision. And think about, well, actually, what is the worst thing that could go wrong? Because it's not necessarily as bad as you think it's going to be.
Right. Well, this is really very, very helpful. I want to change gears and go into sports. What got you into refereeing?
So I love football, right?
Yes.
I grew up in the northeast of England, and everybody loves football in the northeast of England. Well, most people love football, and I enjoyed playing, but I wasn't very good at football. And so I would, on a Sunday morning, my dad would take me along and I would just watch amateur football. And one Sunday morning, I was watching a game and I was watching the game and I saw the referee. And the referee, in my opinion, wasn't having a great game, wasn't necessarily the best qualified to referee that game. And I thought to myself, I think I can do that. I'm going to give that a go. And in those days, newspapers were still sold.
Yes.
No internet in those days. And there was a little ad in a paper which said, if you're interested in becoming a referee, please call this number. So I phoned the number. I did a 16-week training course, which resulted in a written examination and an oral examination, passed with flying colours. And at 16 years old, I became a referee.
Wow.
And the reason I look back now, and my driver was because I wanted to be involved in a sport that I loved, but I was never going to be good enough to be involved to a really good level because I wasn't a great player. And so what refereeing allowed me to do was participate in a sport that I loved to a really high level, but also give something back to a sport that ultimately I loved.
This is so powerful, actually, simple yet powerful, because if you look at any endeavor, music, arts, or mathematics or anything, people may want to be players there, but maybe they don't have the capabilities to play at an Olympian level. But there are so many other angles where you could really make a big difference there. I mean, and refereeing is so important for games because they could make or break these things, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And so that was the driver. And a fantastic career and involved at a level that I never thought, Scottish Premier League, which I never thought I would ever be on the pitch with players of that ability. But to your point, I was able to bring something else to the game, which was fantastic, but also was, a huge sense of sort of purpose or driven to make a difference.
Amazing. Well, you also have run all the major 6 marathons, maybe 7 now, twice over, right?
Yeah, twice over.
Yeah, that's really fantastic. So actually pushing yourself to excellence to that level. And you probably spoke about it, but my question is, if there's anything you want to add, what did that teach you about both yourself, life in general, and leadership as well?
So I think on the marathon front, it definitely taught me resilience, because it can be quite difficult at times to run 26 miles, and therefore what it taught me is the determination and the motivation to keep going. It also taught me the need to have a plan, because you can't just rock up and run 26 miles, and actually you need to plan it out. And I think the other thing it gives you when you're training is that time for yourself to just. So I often think about sort of, healthy body, healthy mind.
That's right.
And so when I'm running on my training runs, and if I think I've had a tough day at work, I can almost replay that in my head to get clarity about what I should do, what not to do. Nobody can argue with me. Nobody tells me I'm wrong. So I found when I was training for my first marathon that actually it gave me a lot of headspace. And as well as getting physically fit, I felt mentally fit and more agile. And I would say that transferred into the workplace, because I definitely felt more on top of my game because of that sort of mental and physical fitness.
Well, this is very, very interesting. So if I just go into the refereeing space, you told us about a challenging or a difficult moment in business, but were there any challenging moments on pitch? If you could share some examples.
I mean, there are quite a few, right? I mean, so I think first things first is, sounds obvious, right? But when you referee, you will never, ever get every single decision right. So it's how you deal with a situation when you know you've made a mistake or you've given a poor decision, to have the confidence and ability to be able to get on with it. And one of my funniest moments was I was refereeing a big game in Edinburgh between Heart of Midlothian and Glasgow Rangers. So big game, live on TV, 17,000 people in the stadium. And I obviously had given maybe 1 or 2 decisions which the Rangers fans and the Hearts fans both disagreed with. So at one point I had 17,000 people singing in unison, "You don't know what you're doing."
Wow.
And so somebody said to me, "Do you hear the crowd when you referee?" And I said to them, "If you had 17,000 people singing together, you don't know what you're doing, you might be able to hear them." And they said, "What did you do?" And I said, "I smiled knowingly." So there's that sense of you're aware of your background, you're aware of what's going on, but that focus on the pitch with 22 players and your assistant referees is what gets you through when you know that maybe the last decision you gave was not the best decision. So often, again, in business and in leadership, I think a couple of things. One is sort of how you carry yourself often is really important and not always considered. But when I referee, how I carried myself gave a degree of confidence that, no matter what, we were going to get there. And that definitely translates across to the business world.
That's really fascinating. And Mike, you are a member of our governing body at Heriot-Watt University, again, at a time where change is happening in the world. So what do you think the kind of change universities in general, not only Heriot-Watt, need to get into? And what would be the number one responsibility of a university in such a world?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, it's really interesting because I think when I joined the Corps, I was quite surprised at the extent of the amount of research, for example, that Heriot-Watt did, that some of the partnerships that we have with some of the world's leading organizations across engineering, across healthcare. I mean, Heriot-Watt was the place I went to be educated, right? And I know the world's moved on a lot. So I think for me, I had not appreciated until I joined Heriot-Watt just how important great universities can be to help the world solve some of the biggest challenges and some of the biggest problems, as well as into the mix, educating the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. So I think for me, universities have a huge role to play in helping the world deal with some of the biggest challenges that ultimately we have, whether that be, from an environmental perspective, financial perspective, climate change obviously is linked to the environment. So I think universities have a significant role to play in that respect.
And you've noticed that particularly in Malaysia, we really focus on purpose.
Yeah.
And our students and our staff have impact statements. We've seen that. Yeah. So what do you think of this and its importance and its potential? And do you have any word for us?
Yeah. So I think what's been really powerful for me, and I didn't have an impact statement when I was at Heriot-Watt because that was 1994, right? Yes. But for me, I think it has been fantastic to hear, for example, Nicole David yesterday at our graduation ceremonies here in Malaysia talk about her impact statement. Yes. To hear all the students talk about their impact statement, because what you're doing is effectively taking yourself, your characteristics, your education, who you are, and really making a statement about who you are and what you are. And actually, I spoke to Ruth about whether the court should have a session as part of Strategy 2035, because we lead Strategy 2035 with an impact statement. That's right. And actually, I think as a court member, it would be brilliant if we did an exercise to ultimately come up with our own individual impact statements, because it's a really powerful thing to do.
And of course, our chair of court does have an impact statement.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sure he will be listening to us at one point in time.
Indeed. Yeah.
Fantastic. So what do you consider your greatest achievement so far?
Well, my children. My children would absolutely be my greatest achievement. I mean, the fact I've got, a 24-year-old son, 20-year-old daughter, they would be, personally, to become a parent, to become a father, to become a mother, I think is one of the biggest achievements in life. I think in my working career, my professional career, when I left Aberdeen Standard Life Investments, because it changed its name many times after 28 years, the biggest sense of satisfaction I got was the number of people who reached out to me and said, you spent some time with me, you had a conversation with me, you helped me think about my career, you helped me think about my personal development. So it was the fact that a number of people talked about their time in my organization and were able to link me to helping them. And because that's a legacy. It's and that for me was really important, is that ultimately you've done something to help others effectively shape their careers, shape their lives. And that I think is better than, delivering a big project or, being part of a merger or an acquisition. I've done some really big transformational activity, but when you have a bunch of people saying you genuinely made a difference to me, there's a huge sense of satisfaction attached to that.
At the end of the day, it's all about people.
It's all about people.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So if you were in a reflective mode, were able to give your 25-year-old self an advice, what would that be? And would it be any different from the advice that you would give to your own son or daughter now? Multifaceted question.
I mean, I think it's really funny. Dr. Raja talked about some things in the Dubai.
Our pro-chancellor in Dubai. Yeah.
Work hard. Work hard, right? Because there is no substitute for hard work, right? So work hard.
So even work harder for your 25-year-old self.
Yeah, work hard. Right. Be inquisitive.
Yes.
Be curious. Never be afraid to ask a question because you feel stupid or you feel daft, because actually you will be surprised at the number of people who want to be able to help you answer difficult questions. And so my young self, I often reflect on how have I changed. And that is, I when you're young and you're ambitious and you're, full of life, I think you can tend to be quite focused and sometimes a little bit narrow-minded. Right. And for me, one of the big things is now knowing and understanding my limitations and being able to say that I'm not great at that. Can you help me? And so I think it would be build a network of people who can help you, because working together, you will achieve more than purely as an individual. Is definitely something I've come to learn, and I've come to really enjoy, actually.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure this is the same advice you would give to young
children.
people listening
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
us and our students
and our
our
students.
children.
Yeah.
No,
Being part of a team and a team winning is fantastic.
And of course, even when the team loses, there's also
There's
something
the
to be
learning
learned.
points, right? Yeah. I mean, and absolutely, and definitely at times in your career, you won't always win. And actually, the team that sort of loses together, reflects on it, works out how to be better the next time. You take more from that sometimes than constantly just winning. Yeah, absolutely.
And is there what's next for you? What's your new passions? The thing that you would like to do and work on?
Yeah. So for me, I think the reason I'm on court and have been on court now for 7 years is that ability to give back. So I've learned a lot of experiences from my time in financial services and leading large change, building networks, building relationships. So for me, continuing to be involved in organizations and activities that allow me to give something back, but also allows me to continue to learn and grow. So for example, I did in my career spend a lot of time in Asia. I'd been to Malaysia twice with work, but this is the first time I've been able to get back to Malaysia for 7 years. Wow. So even on this trip, I've learned more about Malaysia because it's 7 years since I've been here. I'm looking at it from a different perspective. So I'm, 54 years old. I'm, graduated 31 years ago, but I'm still learning. And I've learned a lot from this trip to both Malaysia and Dubai about higher education, about Heriot Watt, about how we fit into the ecosystem in both those places. And that's fantastic, which shows that, I'm still learning.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. So what is one book that impacted you, changed your thinking, that you even recommended to the people who listen?
Wow.
Yeah.
So I've read a few books, and I tend to like sort of autobiographies by sports. And I suppose there's a couple. One would be Freddie Flintoff, cricketer, which I know in India and Pakistan and the cricket is, I don't know whether Malaysia is whether cricket is kind of
not really. But
no. But he is a phenomenal cricketer, but had some ups and downs. He was captain of England. He bit of a party animal, but I think what I got was a genuine sense of passion, energy, commitment. But it wasn't all plain sailing, and he is rightfully held up now. As somebody, he's working with England cricket again. Somebody who ultimately had a phenomenal talent and was a little bit wayward, but actually kind of got through that and understood. And then the other is from football. You won't be surprised. Is a player who played for a club that I support, Manchester United, and it's a midfielder called Michael Carrick, and he played about 30 times for England. But his story is fascinating because he grew up in the northeast of England, played for Wallsend Boys Club, went to sort of play for West Ham, I think it was, as an apprentice, and he was so homesick, and and this boy from the northeast of England went somewhere else, and he was a phenomenal player. But he really suffered when he played for England because he didn't feel like he belonged.
Right.
And so there was almost a little bit about imposter syndrome because, but if you look at his club career, he won the Premier League, he won the Champions League, phenomenal, but he never transferred that to the national team. And he will openly talk about, he had anxiety and things. So when I think about sort of my career, I think it's about making sure that you think about sort of preparing for a big meeting or a board meeting. Is what do you do to make yourself feel confident in terms of your ability to be able to deliver? Because you do belong there.
Yeah.
And you should have the confidence to operate on that stage. So I read his book it was a very simple book, but it did teach me about sort of not being overly confident, but actually having the confidence and the belief in your ability that you belong.
Right. This is very interesting because it leads to my next question. If there is any daily or regular ritual that you do so that you keep in that you show up in that form.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important in the business world, and I'm sure it's the same in higher education, is it's really important to be consistent. Because you need to be authentic.
Yes.
But I think for me, sort of, I once got feedback from one of my managers that you're very consistent. So you don't tend to have the huge highs and the huge lows. You have highs and you have lows, but you don't go to the extreme, right? And so for me, I suppose, whether it's a ritual or whether it's just something that
mental exercise.
Mental exercise is it's interesting because the words come up quite a lot in our strategy 2035.
Yes.
Is to be purposeful.
Right.
So for me, if I'm disappointed, then it's okay to say that you're disappointed. It's not okay to shout at people and show your disappointment, right? Because that's not a very pleasant thing to do. So for me, I think it is ultimately making sure that you are balanced, you're consistent, and so that people then know who you are, what you're about, and then tend to approach more. Because when you can create those conditions, it leads to success.
Right.
And I think if I know I have something important to do, it's better I go into a office and do stuff than have sort of be out there on the floor, open desk, and people come to me when I know I've got something to do. So if I know I've got something really important to do, I'll probably go to an office and just do that so I can focus on it, because I want to be helpful, but at the same time I need to focus. So if I ever have to focus solely on a task, I'll go away and do that, because I don't want people to think I'm being rude because I don't have time, because normally I would make time for people.
Fantastic. So I want to take you back to the refereeing world, and one of the relatively new innovations, the VAR.
Yeah.
Hate it, love it, neutral, and why?
So I love technology, right? I think if you look at tennis, if you look at cricket, if you look at rugby, even if you look at goal line technology, right? Then technology has a huge role to play to get the right decision. I think the problem with video assistant refereeing in football and a little bit in rugby is not everything is clear cut. And so in some respects, even when you review a foul, there is still a judgment attached to that.
Right.
However, for an offside, it's factual.
Yes.
The ball in or out of play,
yes,
it's factual.
Yes.
And so video assistant refereeing effectively probably needs people to invest more time to make quicker decisions. And so I think the technology is phenomenal. And I actually think the technology will get to a stage where even where you have a linesman who decides whether the ball is in or out, I think those decisions will be made by technology, which means that actually if I'm on the line, I no longer have to worry about ball in and out of play. I can spend all my time helping the referee with what's going on the pitch.
Right.
Because if you think about sort of, ball in or out is a lower order decision than something that's going on the pitch.
Right.
But if I'm spending all my time worrying about whether this ball is in or out.
So prioritization.
Exactly, yeah. So I think what VAR will eventually do is allow much more focus on higher order decisions. And when I think about the application of technology in the workplace and AI and things like that, I think there's a lot of tasks that we ask people to do today about bringing together numbers. Actually, I want them to spend more time analyzing the numbers than bringing the numbers together.
Right.
So if I think about the application of technology to finance and financial services, it's how can I effectively apply the technology to lower order decisions to allow more time for the individual, human in the loop, to look at the higher value tasks and activities.
Amazing. That's really fascinating, and how things keep on coming together, right?
Absolutely.
In our conversation.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there question that I should have asked you, but I didn't? Or a question that you would have liked me to ask you?
No, I mean, I think the only thing I would ask is it's probably a question for you, which is
sure.
How can people like me as court members help you in your role as CEO principal here in Malaysia to really help Malaysia sort of move forward, ambitions for growth, and really how can we help you in your role help power Malaysia to bigger and better?
So everything that we said earlier, it actually falls into that space.
Yeah.
So the more understanding of both the challenges and the opportunities, that is very helpful. Being here with our students, with the community, it really helps a lot because, believe it or not, we are a Scottish university, and people see us as so, and I think that is very, very important. So I think being part of the solution, understanding our challenges, and supporting our story, and also, interestingly, in a time where higher education worldwide is under a sort of attack or lack of understanding, and where being global needs to almost fight for its right of existence. I think telling the story and showing the value that's being added by being together, I think that would be extremely helpful. On a personal level, it's always good to know that you can call someone, maybe have a chat with them, that will help you frame your mind, help you understand maybe there is another way to doing something. So I think we are, as a community, we are much stronger together when we interact and speak with each other.
Great. Brilliant. Thank you.
Fantastic. That was really nice,
Good.
Mike. Good to have you, and thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
a lot. Thank you.